Welcome to the Silver Screen Guide podcast, where we discuss films from every genre. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Today we are discussing the hit Katy Perry song, Wide Awake. This is your co-host, Corbin.
I'm Allen, and man, this is one of my favorite songs ever.
This is one of our favorite songs, listeners. This is exactly why we decided to review Katy Perry's song, Wide Awake. No, I am just kidding. We are not reviewing Wide Awake by Katy Perry. Why would we do that on a movie review podcast? We are discussing M. Night Shyamalan's second film, technically his first theatrical film, you probably could say. It's Wide Awake. It's called Wide Awake.
Yeah, this is the real first, technically, movie from M. Night Shyamalan. Not The Sixth Sense. And kind of not really, but also kind of sort of his last movie, Praying with Anger, which was really only it was kind of like a festival film. It really didn't release in too many theaters aside from those festivals I was at. But this is the one that really actually got some publicity outside of just a select few theaters, if that.
So many people think of The Sixth Sense as his first film, and yes, that was his first critically acclaimed film, but technically that was his third theatrical film and the fourth film he had written, because right after Wide Awake in the same year he had Stuart Little came out. I know that is always a shock. If you pay attention to the opening credits, if you're sitting in Stuart Little, you're expecting a fun family movie, and if you were just watching this at the time Stuart Little came out, you would be thinking nothing of it because you had probably never heard of him. In hindsight, after The Sixth Sense and The Village and all of his other movies, you're just sitting there and you see written by M. Night Shyamalan. It's one of those jaw-dropping moments where you're thinking, wait, what? So, it is written by him. It's not directed by him, so we're not considering it an M. Night Shyamalan film. Hence, we're not doing that here on the podcast. But I'm going to be watching it this week, and I'm going to be doing just a short written review. That'll go up on the website. And of course, will be on my Letterboxd account. So if you follow me on there, you'll see it immediately after I watch it. And I'll share that to the different platforms that we have. And I'll kind of give my thoughts and see where his writing is at. Because we've seen him he wrote the first movie, Praying with Anger, and he's written Wide Awake. So is Stuart Little any better with the writing? From what I remember, well, I guess we'll have to see. But this was distributed by a bigger company. It was distributed by Miramax.
Yeah, and are they still a thing? I thought that they went under or got bought out or something.
Yeah,
because you don't see them at all anywhere.
No, Miramax used to be really big. It used to have a lot of movies being pumped out, but it's not a thing anymore. At least under the Miramax title. Okay. I'm not sure whether it got bought or it just went out of business. It just kind of faded into the oblivion, I guess. But this film was released March 20th, 1998. So there was, I believe, Praying with Anger came out around between 90 and 92, something like that. So he had at least probably 6 years, I believe.
Okay, yeah. So it's been a while since this movie came out. But I did read that it had been in production since, I believe, 95. And then it was eventually released in 98.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought I read that somewhere also, that it had been actually finished a lot sooner than its release in 98. Who knows why? Probably, once again, trying to find a reasonable distributor. But even then, this movie, from what I saw on Box Office Mojo, I believe its widest release was 43 theaters.
Oof. So still not great. It's a very limited run.
Right, and it completely wreaked havoc on its box office returns, as you can imagine, because this movie had a bigger budget than his last movie. It had a budget of $6 million, but it only released domestically, and it grossed $282,000.
Yikes. And I mean, I wonder if this was a film that Miramax had suspicious ideals with, where they were like, I don't know if this is going to make that much money. so they kind of didn't really do much with it in terms of releasing it in very many theaters. Companies would typically do that, whereas instead of losing more money and releasing it in a bunch of theaters, they'll release it in a few or push it to just straight to DVD, or in this case, straight to VHS. That way they don't lose nearly as much money as if they would if they went for a wide release, because they do have to pay for some of those rentals.
Right, and maybe they were hoping some of it would have a better life on home video after its theatrical release. I don't have those numbers. I don't know. I am really shocked Miramax took a bet on this movie and put it out in a limited number of theaters because it wasn't worth it. They lost a ton of money. It seems like if they were the ones, giving into all this money, and they very well might not have been. He might have got financing from other places. Opening weekend, it grossed $95,000, which is just awful. And I'm pretty sure opening weekend, it wasn't even in its full 43. I think it was in 20 something theaters, which is like nothing in the country.
Yeah. Yeah. That number seems about right then, to have about $93,000 come out of 20 theaters. That sounds about right for a movie like this.
Also, for some reason, they decided to release it around some of the biggest box office movies of the year. Titanic, despite being in its 14th week, was number one at the box office.
Oh, I'm sure that it was. That one, at the time that it was released, and up until Avatar, it was the number one grossing movie of all time. So, yeah, I do not doubt that it was number one for probably almost this entire theatrical run. Right.
Also, movies like Primary Colors, U.S. Marshals, Good Will Hunting, The Big Lebowski, L.A. Confidential, The Twilight Movie, The Apostle, Dark City, and Steven Spielberg's Oscar-nominated Amistad, which was in its 15th week, they all beat out this movie. This movie was in such a low count that we don't even know what place it came in at the box office, but clearly it came below all of those movies that had been in theaters for months.
Yeah, and those are pretty popular movies. Even the Twilight Zone movie is still a rather popular movie, even though it's been a few years since that show aired. But yeah, doesn't really surprise me, especially when it's only releasing in a handful of theaters. Whereas with a bunch of these other movies, they're probably in almost every theater that you can get your hands on.
And obviously, this should come as no surprise, but this is Shyamalan's lowest grossing film ever. And it's kind of ironic because his next film, The Sixth Sense, would be his highest grossing movie to date.
Yeah, so it's definitely the Sixth Sense that put him on the map for real when in terms of being a director that can make a pretty big impact. But once again, we're not there just yet. We have this one to go through, and then it's The Sixth Sense.
And as far as user ratings and scoring goes, IMDb has it at a solid 6.
Not great.
That's really not great. That's incredibly mediocre to borderline bad. Mostly bad.
Yeah.
Now, as for the Rotten Tomatoes score, it might surprise all of you. It has a score of 40%, which is very bad, but it has an audience score of 67%, which is pretty good. But according to critics, this is his 9th best film. It's ranked higher than Glass, according to critics.
Oof. Interesting.
That was really surprising.
Yeah, I have heard not so great things about Glass. I haven't seen it yet. At least at the time we were recording this, I haven't seen Glass. So, I'm interested now more than ever I was with Glass. Because I was originally not even planning on seeing Glass until we decided to do this retrospective. Now I'm interested. Yes,
I haven't seen Glass yet either. I was definitely planning on seeing it because I saw Unbreakable and Split. I wanted to see the third film in this unlikely trilogy. I am not going to tip my hand what I think about this movie just yet, but I'm just giving you what the audience and critics thought of this, because audiences clearly like this movie with the 67%. And now that works a little bit different. You can't translate that into IMDb ratings and Rotten Tomatoes ratings. because judging by audiences on IMDb, they don't really like it, but on Rotten Tomatoes, that means they like it well enough. Doesn't mean it's just this great, amazing movie. Right. I was just shocked to see critics like it better than Glass. That just seems very surprising to me, considering Glass is supposed to be kind of his Glass and Split, and others are kind of his comeback. He's been making more of a comeback. But for those of you who don't know what this movie is about, I'll give you the plot here in just a minute, but it is about a young boy in 5th grade in Catholic school, kind of dealing with the big questions about life, dealing with death of a family member, his place with God in this world, and just kind of coming of age, childhood, etc. So, where in the world is the Shyamalan connection in this movie? Well, he came to the States at a young age, and he attended Waldron Mercy Academy, which is the real school in this movie. They shot it on location.
Interesting. All right.
And if you will remember back to kind of the themes of the first movie, I believe this is the other side of his views of God and his life. The first film dealt with the Eastern Hindu aspect. This deals with the Western aspect from his childhood. So he seems to be, he went back home, quote home, in the first movie, and this seems to be going back to childhood. So we can tell these first two films he made are deeply personal to him, if not so almost autobiographical, with placing a young Catholic boy in the same school that he attended at around his age. And so it's interesting to see that.
Yeah, it is interesting to have his first two films kind of be complete opposites of each other, because the previous movie was very much a heavier drama. At least that was how it was meant to be. And this one is very lighthearted. It's not as heavy as the last one, but it's still in some ways very personal to him from what I'm seeing here. Because the last one was him dealing with, I'm not sure I'm the director, it was him dealing with where he came from and how his views and how he grew up is much a bit different than what the views and people that his dad came from, that he still kind of lives in his household, are how they're different. And this one, how he comes to terms with that. And this one is very much how he questions this God I'm guessing when he starts following this new religion, I'm guessing, and when he was a kid. And so, yeah, they're very much opposites of each other, because not only are the two ideals different, but also he takes the tone of these two movies and makes them also almost opposite of each other, because, like I said, that one's is a bit darker in terms of how it portrays certain things. And this next one is also a bit more lighthearted, but there are still some pretty big similarities between the two of them.
And as far as I could tell, M. Night Shyamalan does not appear in this movie physically at all. He does cameo. He was the main star of his last movie. Yeah. And I am pretty sure he cameos in every movie. I'm pretty sure, since that's kind of a thing where they're like, oh, M. Night Shyamalan's in it. But in this one,
I'm pretty sure he does some kind of cameo in every single movie aside from, I guess, this one. Because, I didn't see him either. Yeah. I looked for him.
And I looked it up, and other people said he's not in this also.
Okay. It may have not been his thing yet. Once he got into Sixth Sense, then it kind of became the thing that he did.
Which is, we'll talk about it, but very much an Alfred Hitchcock signature he's trying to probably take from, it seems like.
Yeah, and I mean, that's nothing new. Directors do this all the time. Alfred Hitchcock is probably the one who popularized it, though.
Sure. Listeners, if you have not seen Wide Awake and you would like to check it out, this one is a lot easier to get your hands on than Praying with Anger. So go ahead and pause it, rent the movie, or you can actually buy this one and watch it, come back and click play, and we will be ready to talk about all the spoilers for M. Night Shyamalan's second film, Wide Awake. Joshua A. Beale, played by Joseph Cross, is starting September by entering the 5th grade and dealing with the recent death of his grandfather, played by Robert Loggia, whom he was quite close with. He's not ready to move on from childhood, and he still sleeps with his teddy bears, and he's not had any closure from his grandfather's death. Regardless, he still has to wake up and get ready for school. He attends Waldron Mercy Catholic Academy with his best friend Dave, played by Timothy Reifsnyder. One day he asks Dave if he believes in God, to which Dave replies no. Josh remembers his grandpa believed in two things: always keep your hands on the ball and always keep your faith. In order to feel closer to his grandpa and to literally hold on to his faith, he joins the football team but is quickly kicked out for fighting with Freddie, played by Michael Pacienza, the school bully. Determined to understand why his grandfather had faith in God, even in the face of death, Joshua goes on a mission to find God. One night at the dinner table, he listens to his older sister Nina, played by Julia Stiles in one of her first roles, tell their parents that Cardinal Geary, played by Gil Robbins, is coming to speak at their school. Oh, and people believe he can talk with God. The next day at school, Joshua has Dave orchestrate a distraction in order for him to sneak out and ask the Cardinal to see if God is real and his grandpa is okay. Before he leaves through the emergency exit, the new kid in school, played by Michael Craig Bigwood, apparently everyone is named Michael in this movie, warns Joshua to turn off the alarm first. After sneaking into the girls' school, he's aided by Hope, played by Heather Kassler. The first girl Josh has ever noticed is attractive, from getting caught by the school authorities. That was a disjointed sentence, but you'll catch on. But after the Cardinal's lecture, Josh finds him in the bathroom where he's nearly incapacitated by his sickness, which reminds Josh of his grandpa and leaves him disillusioned and confirmed God doesn't talk with the Cardinal. December comes and Josh is no closer to finding God. He tries singing louder to God so he'll hear him. He plans a trip to Rome for his family to meet the Pope, which he believes is God's best friend, and he even tries practicing Islam and Judaism in the hope of finding God. As his faith wanes, so does the allure of childhood. If faith in God seems silly, then enjoying toys and playing make-believe sounds really silly. He's worried growing up isn't what it's all cracked up to be. Back at school, Dave tells Josh he heard on CNN it's going to snow that night. Josh, I didn't know CNN did the weather, but I guess they do.
Maybe they did back in the day.
Back in the day for every city in the country, okay. Josh doubts that it'll snow, but Dave's foretelling comes to fruition. Unfortunately, the snow doesn't stick, and neither does Josh's belief in God. After a few days later, at a friend's birthday party, he meets his friend Hope once again, who asks if he's found what he's looking for, and when he tells her he hasn't, she assures him that he will. While getting ready for bed, Josh remembers during the months preceding his grandpa's death, his grandpa told him snow was proof of God. Despite Josh's scientific response, his grandfather explains he believes God will take care of him after he's gone. After his reminiscing, Josh runs to the window to find a winter wonderland. Jumping ahead to May, the school year is coming to a close and so is the mission. With all hope nearly lost, Josh believes he better figure out the mystery of God soon. Dave has been missing more and more from school in the preceding months, which causes Josh to worry about him. After school, Josh goes to Dave's house and finds Dave passed out from an epileptic seizure. Being the last straw, Dave accepts his grandpa was simply a fool who believed in a made-up God. But, later at the hospital, Dave tells Josh not to give up on his mission. God is real. Dave the skeptic is now the believer because he realizes Josh finding him was nothing short of a miracle. On the last day of school, Josh notices not everyone is accounted for the class picture, as he sees the new kid walking through the hallway. As he reaches the new kid, he tells Josh this nebulous he has been watching him from heaven and that he's happy now. When Josh questions, "You mean Grandpa?" he turns around to see the young boy has disappeared. This little boy has been Josh's guardian angel all along, to which Josh concludes, "I believe two things. Not all angels have wings, and 6th grade has got to be a lot easier than this." Josh's faith has been restored. As credits roll.
Okay.
Ooh.
So, I'm going to go ahead and say that the IMDb plot summary lied when it said that one of the nuns is one of the nuns that's there, and that would be kind of his teacher in this movie. She is the one who follows him along and is kind of like her, and she aids him apparently in the story. I don't think that's true at all, because she only really shows up to do that kind of a thing in like 2 scenes in this entire movie. The rest of it is essentially just our main character doing it on his own and figuring things out by himself. There's really only one or two scenes when I think her name is Sister Sophia actually does help in this journey. And that's about it. Yet the IMDb's is like, oh yeah, this nun also is the one who kind of helps him out and aids him through this journey. I don't believe that. That's not true.
Yeah, let's talk about the marketing here for just a minute. And also the cast, because although I did mention the cast of this movie, I didn't get to mention the full cast because they factor into the plot in such a minute way that I really couldn't work them in an organic way. So this film does have a pretty well-known cast, probably most specifically his grandfather played by Robert Loggia, also his dad is played by Dennis Leary, and then Alan just mentioned the nun who's played by Rosie O'Donnell, who, if you'll notice all the posters for this movie, it's Josh standing on a stack of books and Rosie O'Donnell with a baseball glove and a giant baseball, red Converse sneakers and a baseball hat.
Right.
And yeah, she is kind of this athletic, sports-oriented nun that doesn't factor into this movie whatsoever. We don't get any God and sports analogies at all. Completely wasted. And on the front cover, it's them together. So you think, okay, these are the stars. And even on the front cover, it says Rosie O'Donnell is hilarious. So billing her as one of the big people. And yeah, Dennis Leary has top billing, Rosie O'Donnell, Robert Loggia. And the tagline on this package anyway says, she had all the answers until now.
Which only plays into like one scene.
Right. And even in that one scene, which we will talk about, we really don't get much out of it. There's just really not a whole lot of stuff. So, yeah, it is kind of disappointing. This film is completely mismarketed. I'm pretty sure they did that in order to just get people in the theaters like, oh, Rosie O'Donnell's in it. She's really funny. She was a lot better known back then. She's really not on anybody's radar screens right now. And a lot of these other actors. So it's a kind of a bit of a bait and switch where they're trying to market a movie in a certain way. And then, no, it's not that kind of movie at all.
Right. I'm guessing they did this definitely for and in terms of trying to get some more money out of it, because putting M. Night Shyamalan's name on it is not going to go anywhere yet, because he hasn't really made a name for himself as of the time this movie released. Rosie O'Donnell is probably the biggest name here, and don't get me wrong, she is in a lot of this movie, but once again, she doesn't exactly do too much aside from a couple of scenes. And so, yeah, it's very much one of those things where they try to take one of the most well-known actors or one most well-known something in a movie and put it out there as if it's one of the main things of this movie, which she kind of is, I guess, if you want to stretch it. But in reality, she only plays in a few scenes that really don't go anywhere for the most part. So yeah, this is very much a money kind of market. It's a bit more for money. Hopefully they can get more people to watch it if they have Rosie O'Donnell's name on it than if they would just have, like, say, the main character or the only person there, or maybe the main character and his family or something like that. It makes a bit more sense, but at the same time, you're right. That's not this movie. It's a very different movie than what it's being marketed as.
Now, as for the opening of the movie, it was giving me a sense of M. Night Shyamalan wants us to think this is going to be along the lines of, at least in the childhood aspect of To Kill a Mockingbird, because this kind of opened with a lot of childhood drawings, crayons, and I remember To Kill a Mockingbird was opening with trinkets and with Scout like humming or something. It also, I'm pretty sure Curly Sue opens that way also, but don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. Regardless, M. Night Shyamalan's trying to draw on some more well-known movies to give you some thoughts of, oh yes, this is very childhood-like. I gotta say, these nearly silent drawings and some weird spinning motions over the voiceover dialogue between Josh and Grandpa does not work. It's weird.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. And one of my other things that I was thinking of along that list of Curly Sue and To Kill a Mockingbird was also A Christmas Story, because that's also one that's very child-centered, where the child is the main narrator in the story and the main actor.
That's true.
That's kind of what I was getting off of this, is just as well as also To Kill a Mockingbird. But yeah, it is strange. We get it's set up pretty quickly that this main character, Josh, has a pretty strong relationship with his grandpa. And we do find out not too long after this that the grandpa has recently, or I guess he's died. And then we find out a bit later that it's been, I guess, rather recent that he's died. But they don't really explain that very well until much later into the movie. But yeah, we get set up right away that this kid's role model is his grandpa and that he loves football. And that's, at the moment, that's about it. He is dreaming about the time that he was with his grandpa and he had this one conversation about football.
Yes, this film is literally broken down into a 3-act structure. September, December, and May, with title cards for each of them. And I believe much later, and quite late into the movie, we learned that his grandpa died while he was away at summer camp, so he kind of never really got that closure, never got to see him before he died. So summer camp, who knows when that ended and when he died, sometime over the summer, but September is not long after that. So his grandpa is recently deceased, his items are still in the house, and Josh is, I don't know, I don't think he's necessarily depressed, he's just sad. He doesn't want to wake up for 5th grade. And I will say I thought it was funny when the mom throws his covers off and he's got all the teddy bears and he's sleeping with a toothbrush in his mouth. Now, how this will factor into the movie later on is awfully cheesy.
Yeah.
And factor into the title even.
Yeah. And I mean, okay, this is the weirdest thing that I thought, because there was a line later on that confused me a little bit. He didn't go to the funeral because he's at summer camp. But I would just kind of assume that the parents already know that he's pretty close with his grandpa. So they would probably, in my mind, would have pulled him out of summer camp so he can go to the funeral. And I mean, I guess it's also a pretty long summer camp, because usually funerals aren't held until maybe about a week after the person dies, typically, or a week or two. So if summer camp lasts like a whole month, then I guess I can kind of buy, but at the same time, those usually don't last more than a week or two. So it just seems weird that he didn't get to go to the funeral at all. That just seems like kind of, the parents here don't act like great parents, to be honest with you. They make decisions that just seem strange. Like they don't take him out of summer camp so he can go to the funeral. Later on, they take the things out of Grandpa's room without telling our main character. And then after that, maybe it's before that, but it doesn't matter. They take him out and the parents, mom and dad, are like giving him toys and things like that, trying to get to know, or I guess spending more time with him out of really nowhere. The parents here are very strange all the way around.
Yeah, the parents are shallow characters, to say the least. What could have been, and most likely should have been, stronger characters to support a young child with the passing of a grandfather who lived with them at home. And then the dad is kind of funny, and the mom is just like, hey, we need to move on. I put his rocking chair in your room, so that'll help. And that's pretty much the only kind of, I can't even really say character building scene between the two of them for the most part. And then we just get that, like you said, voiceover narration where my parents started spending time with me because they wondered what was going on with me. Oh, that's the only reason they started spending time with you? Well, that's a little sad.
That is,
okay.
That's kind of what I'm talking about, is the parents here are very much almost non-characters. They're just very much in the background. They don't really do too much unless the script asks for them to do something. They aren't really worked in very well to the script at all.
Well, and I'll say that's one of the more aggravating parts of this movie is how many non-characters there are that still are sprinkled throughout the movie. It's like M. Night Shyamalan forgot how to write characters, and I'm kind of jumping a bit ahead of myself, but it's okay. I'm going to go ahead and say I think the first 20 minutes are compelling. They're funny. I'm interested. We get some pretty well written dialogue, and I'll talk about that here in just a minute. But then the film just begins to forget how to be a film and how to make characters and give us satisfying arcs. And of course, there's a major lack of focus.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
And I would say that it's not necessarily just the characters that have a bit of an issue where there's just a lot of random ones. I'd say it goes for almost every single aspect of this movie, especially when it comes to like just the events that happen in the script, because there are scenes that just straight up don't belong in here. My first example I can give right now is the passing the tray scene in the cafeteria. That happens for no reason, goes absolutely nowhere, and never comes back ever again. It's one of those things that there are just random things put into this movie for no reason at all, and have absolutely no payoff to them, or any reason to be here. I think you're right in saying that the first 20 minutes are somewhat compelling, and then the next hour is totally not. It kind of reminds me a lot of the last movie, where we both kind of thought that the first 20 minutes or so was pretty interesting, how they were bringing up these certain themes, and about these people questioning, or about the main character questioning this society that he lives in. But then after so long, they create so many subplots that they have to now play catch up to get them all resolved. This movie kind of doesn't do that thing with the subplots, but has a really bad job at getting everything that it introduces to work back into the script in a compelling way, or even at all sometimes. In reality, it's just a really poorly written script, just kind of in general.
And I'm disappointed about that because, like I said, the opening, I am invested because we see this young boy go and sit in his grandpa's rocking chair. He imitates smoking his pipe. I thought that was very cute. And there is a really nice edit where the boy reaches over to put the pipe away and it cuts right to his grandpa's arm doing that, showing him in bed and talking about that. I like the setup there. And it's funny because they're dropping the kid off at school for the first day and his dad is like, try to agree with the nuns. And I went to a Catholic college, which is a little bit different, but I did work closely with the nuns. They're wonderful people. And the dad's telling the daughter, wave to your brother. And I think probably the funniest scene in the whole movie is when the kids start asking about hell. And they're saying, wait, my neighbors are Indian. They're going to hell. And he's like, my baseball coach doesn't go to church. You mean he's going to hell? I thought that was all funny.
Yeah, and see, this is one of those scenes where the teacher, this is when we were first introduced to Sister Sophia, she doesn't really have an answer for all this, and they never come back with an answer. It's just one of those scenes where it just goes on. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is kind of funny, but it just goes on for such a long time that you assume that there's going to be some kind of payoff with it, and then there absolutely isn't.
And we shortly start to get multiple subplots introduced that don't lead anywhere, or if they do, I guess I'm really bad at following storylines.
I wouldn't blame you at all for this script at all, because it's so all over the place, and especially in certain points.
It really is. So we're introduced to Brickman, who is considered a weirdo. I thought he might be the school bully at first, the way he's kind of ominously walking down the steps at him and they want to avoid him. No, he just is, he either is just legitimately weird or he has some kind of issues. Starts acting like a chimp and attacking a family. Okay. And then we learn Dave doesn't believe in God. And this scene is bookended with the introduction of Freddie Waltman, who is the school bully, who's really not that bad of a bully, honestly. And these two people will continue throughout the movie, and we're supposed to learn lessons from them. Waltman just fizzles out, and Brickman just leaves me baffled as to what we're supposed to get from the kidnapping of the Pope scene later on.
Once again, there are things like, I can get Freddie. I think I understand why they brought him into the equation to a certain extent, I suppose, but it's another one of those things where because when at the very end of the movie, he does have to leave the school because his parents can't pay for him to be there any longer. So it is kind of an interesting scene to see our main character kind of go up to him and kind of say goodbye to him. Really the only one who I guess that we see say goodbye to him. But once again, there really is no setup for this payoff. It's just kind of payoff, but there's no reason for it to be here. In reality, Freddy probably should have been written out completely and have that whole section just kind of not even exist, because it doesn't really do anything for the script, along with a few other things. But that's just, in terms of Freddy, there's not much there really at all.
What would have made those sequences stronger is if they would have properly utilized the grandfather flashbacks as to him learning lessons from his grandfather that he didn't really understand in the moment, but now he is taking those lessons from his deceased grandfather into his current life and into the future. Those would have made those a bit stronger. And then, of course, giving a little more weight to these two characters as well, and giving them some kind of depth, because they really don't have anything to them aside from One is a misunderstood bully, and I still don't understand Brickman's character.
I don't either. And at first I was, I think it's like the second or third interaction that this movie has with him, I was just like, are they actually making fun of like someone that's might even be disabled? In the end, they kind of resolve that. But I was just like, that's not good. They do resolve that. But yeah, Brickman, they never really give a clear answer as to what's going on with him. If he's just weird, if he's just known to act weird, because I have a brother who kind of acts like that. Now, he's not like disabled anyway. He just sometimes goes off and does crazy things. But I was just thinking, are they actually doing this? But still, he has no reason to be here aside from just kind of being comic relief. And I guess kind of a lesson at the end of the story. Although I couldn't pick up what I was trying to say with that. Aside from just, I don't even know.
Well, we're also introduced at recess to the new kid, which he believes will be picked on more than him because he's smaller than him. And of course, the new kid pops up at convenient times to, he only really helps him out once with the alarm. Right. The other time, they're trying to cheat on a test. And he comes up down the hallway and they just wave him on and then he just meanders off and doesn't do anything for him. We also are introduced to Frank Bennett, who sweats a lot. He's his big friend who wants to play ninjas. Later on, they'll get stuck in a thing for an hour and a half, which seemed really unbelievable to me. And he just learns to be nice to him.
Yeah. Okay. That's the thing. The only time Frank is only brought up twice, and that's here in the recess scene and then later in the museum. And that's it. He doesn't really do anything else aside from those two scenes. And even then, it's not even that big of a deal, especially when they get caught in the rotating arm, which, by the way, they could very easily get out of that if they just kind of shimmied to the left a little bit, but whatever, I guess.
It was just a needlessly contrived conflict that ultimately didn't teach me anything. Anyways, I'm still in positive territory here. I'm still into the movie. I'm intrigued. Joshua now wants to play football because of his grandpa, and I think there is some really well-written dialogue between the parents and between the siblings. I found it a funny scene where Josh just pops up in bed in the middle of them, and then the mom turns the light off, turns it back on, and all of a sudden Lena, or it's Nina actually, she pops up in bed also, and it's really funny. So I'm having high hopes for this movie so far, and I'll tell you where my hope dropped off, and that is right after the communion scene where he's in church with his grandpa. His grandpa goes up to get communion, and he realizes, this is where Josh kind of realized the mortality of humanity, because he says, oh, I didn't realize so-and-so was sick, because I think a small child realizes sickness is more so outward and not so much inward. And then he sees that his grandpa goes up for communion and healing also or something, and his hands are shaking. And I'm like, oh, this is a good scene. And I did like the line where he said his grandpa believed in two things: keep your hands on the ball and always keep your faith. Well, the boy translates that literally and kind of connects faith and, football as they go hand in hand. And if he participates in one, then he'll have the other. So I'm enjoying all of that, and I like that a lot. But then after that communion scene, and I realize we're going to get this really constant monologuing throughout the rest of the film, is when I start to get really bored.
And I was, the film was losing me from almost the very beginning. And I'd say the scene that completely lost me would have been the scene when we are first introduced to Brickman. Because I had this feeling that he is only going to be in this movie for this specific reason, where it's just meant for comic relief and nothing else. And that's when I put it on my notes. This movie is aimless, because there are a lot of scenes that just don't really have much of a through line. They just kind of go from one scene to the next with nothing connecting them at all. And that happens so often that this movie, like I said earlier, I don't blame you for being confused on some of these subplots, because there's nothing really connecting a lot of things in this movie. So from then on, I was just like, okay, this movie's beginning to lose me just in heaps and bounds. And then as it went on, the more it started to lose me, especially when it came to the football scene. It just started with the football scene. He got into a fight, and then we never touched football ever again in this movie. I get that it was because of the grandpa that he was in football, so the kid wanted to go for football, but aside from this one scene, that's the only thing you ever get about it.
Yeah, it gives us this like nebulous conclusion that he was forced to quit, maybe because he was, quote, fighting.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just kind of falls flat. And yeah, this movie is kind of, I guess, and this is the problem. When you're trying to write a movie about a kid, you can't make it as if a kid is writing it. You have to be a little smarter than that and structure it like an adult.
Right.
But still provide that childlike mentality in certain scenes. But don't act like the movie is a childlike mentality where it's bouncing from place to place, which is where I think this movie really falters. But I will say the communion scene is probably the last meaningful scene of this movie.
Yeah.
Aside from where they're talking, him and his grandpa are talking about the snow. I thought that was at least a sweet moment between the two of them where he's crying into his grandpa and he knows that he's going to lose him soon. But other than that, this movie, just becomes, and this movie really doesn't know what it wants to be. To me, I found this to be split between Dennis the Menace and some heartwarming comedy, but then also asking all these big questions. It really doesn't know where it wants to go, and then I get really worried when Josh gives us the main goal of the film is to look for God and talk with him. Okay.
And that's kind of the biggest problem with this movie is it's just incredibly surface level. We never probe too deep into any issue that we bring up. And the big question of, can I talk to God? Is God real? Is a huge question. And they, literally aside from just saying the question, they don't probe any deeper than that. With any aspect in this movie. And that's one of the things I didn't like about it is that I kind of walked out, and to be fair, I guess I'm not really necessarily the target audience for this, but I kind of walked out and I'm just like, well, what did we learn at the end of the day? Nothing much, because it didn't probe any deeper than the question that it asked.
And I'm also just a little baffled by how on the nose M. Night Shyamalan gets with his writing and characters here, because the boy goes to see the Cardinal after a really cheesy James Bond scene.
Yes.
Okay, so he goes to see the Cardinal, and okay, I can understand why he would want to go see the Cardinal. But along the way, Josh, of course, falters in his belief, but he is literally supported by Hope. By a little girl named Hope.
Very subtle.
I mean, I just can't believe that he named a character Hope. And, gosh, okay. So, yeah
I'm with you.
This whole first act is called September, by the way, if I haven't mentioned it. It's called The Signs, where I guess he sees signs that God is not real, but all along there was all these different signs by the little angel boy and Hope and maybe Dave doing something, I don't know. Brickman, whatever. We get that there's a lot of different signs. But the first act concludes that he doesn't think God talks to the Cardinal. Because the Cardinal's sick, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't really give too much of a reason why he doesn't think that the Cardinal is talking to God or God talking to the Cardinal. He just says, I don't think God talks to the Cardinal. And then moves on to the next act of December. It's like, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I messed up. September is called The Questions, December is called The Signs, but it doesn't really matter, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It doesn't really matter.
The only thing that I got out of December the Signs was a possible hint of Shyamalan's movie The Signs.
Maybe. I'd say that's a bit of a stretch, but maybe.
I think they're all connected. The Shyamalan verse?
Every movie he's made, every single one is connected in some way. I'm sure that there's I haven't looked it up, but I'm sure that there is a conspiracy theory about that every single one of his movies are connected in some way. Kind of like the Pixar theory. There is a funny line here at the beginning of December. That's when they talk about the snow and how CNN said that there's going to snow. And it says, CNN don't lie. I just thought that was really funny. Just kind of given the more modern circumstances with Trump and him calling CNN fake news. I just found that to be funny, just because of recent events with that.
I did find that very funny as well, where he's like, if it's on CNN, it must be true.
Yep.
And yes, CNN is definitely the one that's always looked at as fake news, and they have legitimately been caught lying before, and they've had to like release some sorry statements. So that is funny. Now, probably back then they were a bit more relied upon than they are today. They have bad ratings today, but I did think that was so funny.
Yeah. Just given the current circumstances, it just makes that line hilarious, which has nothing to do with the movie at all. It does. Because it didn't know that at the time, clearly.
And I did find it funny where they're going to confession and they're saying we make stuff up at confession. And they question, why do the nuns have to be in the locker room while we change clothes? And the boy's waiting for the nun to walk away to change his clothes. And yeah, so those are funny scenes, but I will say we're 30 minutes in, and at this point, I'm still going with the movie. I'm still okay with it, but I'm realizing this movie is really missing a heart. It's striving for deeper themes, but this is the exact word that I had in my notes, and this is what Alan just said. It's shallow so far. And
I think that kind of comes down to Shyamalan not knowing how to get to the end of his message here. I think he has the right idea in terms of what he wants to say, but doesn't know how to work that into a story and make it flow really well. Because like I said earlier, there are scenes that just kind of are placed in here. There are scenes that just don't connect at all. And it's almost as if they are just placed in here seemingly at random. Now, don't get me wrong, they are somewhat important scenes that if you took them out, then you might be missing a chunk or two. But the problem is getting from one scene to the next scene, and there's hardly any through line between the two of them, oftentimes when you change from one scene to the next. I'm guessing the problem with this movie, and kind of the same thing with the last one, is M. Night Shyamalan knows what he wants to say, but doesn't know how to accurately portray that in a story, or even through editing in a very well-rounded way as he would later on in his next movie.
And I believe this movie doesn't become deeper than it is because Shyamalan himself just doesn't know how to do that, or doesn't even know really where to go with it. Because when Josh was asking his grandpa about proof for God or something, and the grandpa just points to, I was kind of excited to see what Robert Loggia would say, but he just points to the snow, and he doesn't really follow that up with, well, God creates the weather and X, Y, and Z. He just says, yeah, it's the snow. And it's just kind of one of those things where it felt very much like the Santa Claus 2, the escape clause, where he says, I don't remember the exact line, but he says, seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing. That just felt like it was ripped straight out of there.
That's almost like the line of, today's today and tomorrow's tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
I remember hearing that. I was like, well, I guess you can't argue with that logic. Oh.
Deep philosophy embedded within this.
Absolutely.
What was the point? Where was he even trying to go with just saying that?
I know that it comes up at one time later when Frank asks him towards the end, he's like, is today tomorrow? And he goes, I think it is, or something like that. That's really the only time it ever comes up at the rest of the movie that I'm aware of, or really anything that means anything, which it still doesn't mean anything, but whatever.
Alan, have you seen the movie The Dead Poets Society?
No, I haven't. It's on my watch list on Netflix. I need to get around to it.
It's quite good, and it is much deeper than this movie. It came out in 1989, so almost 10 years before this movie. There are a number of times where I could see Shyamalan, especially towards the end, he's really trying to go for this Dead Poets Society feel, with just kind of invigorating our emotions and connections with just characters in life. He doesn't get there. He doesn't quite get there. Mm-hmm. Just falls a little short, you might say.
I guess I'll have to check it out now that I've seen this movie.
Yeah. And I'm also getting a little perturbed because I feel like what came across as witty comedy to begin with is now just coming across as really shoehorned comedy where Josh has to repeatedly say holy S word, and then he runs by the Jesus statue and has to say sorry for it. And that's right before the awful scene of Freddy yelling, "Who did this?" Yeah. To me, then it's just like he's trying too hard, and it's just he's losing me.
And I'm just like, when he's running past the statue, I'm just like, be careful, you can't say too many of those before you get a PG-13. Because I think with a PG, I think it's like, I think you can say like 5 or 6 times or something like that. And then it gets like an automatic PG-13, kind of like how the PG-13, if you say the F word more than one time, usually you get a R rating just because of that. I was just like, be careful, you can't say too many of those.
Yeah, once again, to me, it's just like, why is this here?
Yeah, there are plenty of those in this movie.
And I do guess I will say I appreciate that there are some elements that, yes, a little boy would think, let's go to Rome, because the Pope, well, especially a little Catholic boy, I should say, would think the Pope is God's best friend and they can talk. Or the priest says, maybe if we really sing together, God will hear us. And then he winks at Josh, and I thought that was really just melodramatic. And Josh it's a horrible shot of Josh fake singing. Yeah,
you can tell it's fake. It's very clearly that it's fake. In fact, I feel like they almost overdubbed I think that they put both tracks of audio where they have the kids singing and from the actual scene that they recorded, and the dubbed audio from the singing at the same time, and you can just it's a bad edit. It's a terrible edit. And it's not to say I don't think Josh's singing voice is very, very strange all the way around.
Now, did you notice during the scene where he's talking with Rosie O'Donnell about he's now a Muslim, but then he's quit, but now he's a Jew?
Yeah.
Did you notice the camera jittering in that scene also?
I didn't, but I guess I missed that part. I may have been taking notes.
Yeah, the camera just starts shaking up and down.
Interesting.
It's not dramatic, but it's nevertheless there. They couldn't hold the camera steady.
Someone must have bumped it. Okay, this is the only scene in my mind that I think actually makes a little bit of sense and actually has some kind of direction and doesn't feel so aimless like everything else. Because we actually get some dialogue from Sister Sophia that feels like she's being the aide with Josh in the story. This is really the only time this ever happens. Maybe one other time. But yeah, we get this weird... We're told that he's become a Muslim at one point and then fasted during Thanksgiving, which the movie totally skipped over, by the way. So I'm just like,
funny.
Did they film these scenes and then did they edit them out, or did they just not film them at all? They come out of nowhere and they really only come up in this one scene that he apparently became a Muslim or tried to and then was fasting during Thanksgiving. Don't get me wrong, there is a bit more direction here where it feels like this is a very self-contained scene, but there is still a lot of stuff in this one scene at the very beginning, especially where they bring up things that just straight up never happened.
I'll give you that it's interesting, but it's very much suffering from what we saw in David Gordon Green's Halloween, where the film is just not taking its time to just kind of sit with us in these scenes, explore these scenes. Instead, everything has to be told to us. Everything is so scripted and, pushed in our face in that way. So that is really disappointing that we can't just go along with these scenes. And what's also bothering me is the emotions of Josh and those around him don't relate in an organic way. Rather, it's just Josh narrating them to us.
Yeah.
And instead of placing us in the family, we're getting the highlights, which I struggle to connect with.
Yeah, it's very much a Spark Notes version of how the family's doing in this whole situation. Yeah, there is... In reality, if they had been cut out completely, there still wouldn't have been much that was different about this movie, aside from the Deus Ex Machina of the Cardinal being there at the school, which even then is not really not much of a Deus Ex Machina because he's only in that one scene and it goes nowhere.
Also, what's troubling is trying to talk about deep theological questions, but from a childlike perspective, because a child very rarely can arrive at something really deep and theological. Now, that's not always the case because children can sometimes seem to understand things better than adults. They just kind of take away the clutter and see it more simplistically. But this film doesn't do that. Shyamalan doesn't write that. He seems like he doesn't even know what he's talking about, or he can theologically understand from an adult's perspective or a child's perspective. And I'm also bothered by the whole magic of toys scene. It just comes out of nowhere. It's so forced and just shoehorned in there. I understand the connection. If God's not real, then childhood make-believe is silly as well. But it's just like, wait, what? How did we just get here all of a sudden?
Yeah. Once again, there's nothing that leads into this scene of the parents trying to connect with their kid and figure out what's going on with Josh. There's no lead into this happening. And then he goes off on this rant about, well, this is all I see here is just plastic and paint. It's all kind of worthless to me now. It's just like, what? Where did I understand why it's here, but why is it here? You know?
And I did mention earlier the narration. I don't think it's poorly narrated, and I think Joseph Cross does a good job in his role. I just think what really causes the movie to suffer is how just flat it makes everything feel. It just never gives us a moment to actually live in the movie. It's like we are these third-person spectators that get to listen to Josh's, ESPN play-by-play from the radio.
Right. It's very much I think you mentioned this earlier, very much a highlight reel of his journey to finding God. It's nothing really ever sticks. It's nothing ever really, there isn't really anything that allows the audience to really dive into these characters or get to know them or has anything that would cause any kind of emotion aside from, oh, interesting. Maybe. It's one of those movies where, like I said earlier, the deepest it goes is the question that it asks of does God exist? With no answer.
Something that I did find to be, I guess, well done, but still in a very minute way, is when they are at the birthday party and Josh talks with Hope, kind of those early young feelings of becoming interested in the opposite sex and trying to talk with them. I at least thought that was well done, and that reminded me of that age and being nervous to talk to girls and you don't really know what to say and stuff. So I thought that was captured just fine. Unfortunately, it is once again Hope telling Josh he's going to be able to find his mission, and we're distracted by Dave jumping in a pool.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I would say that they do a pretty good job. I do like the line, and it did kind of get a laugh out of me when he says, I'm having a biological reaction.
Yeah.
That did kind of get a chuckle out of me because this kid is kind of known to be, I guess, a bit more scientific with how he looks at things. Like this also comes back into play when he talks to Grandpa about the snow. But yeah. Then, also, there are a lot of kids at this birthday party. Like, a lot of kids. And somehow Hope is there? Was there ever an explanation as to why she was there? Because I didn't think I got anything.
No, my only guess is, I guess we didn't mention this, but I didn't know Catholic school was, at least this Catholic school, is segregated between the sexes. So boys at one school, girls at the other school. My girlfriend went to Catholic school growing up for a number of years, and I don't believe that was the case, so I don't think this is true to all of them. My only guess is they probably go to the same parish, and their moms know each other or something, and so she was invited.
Yeah, but that was never explained, so
No.
We have really no idea why she's there, aside from the obvious answer of, well, Hope is there to help him with this journey. Which, once again, very subtle.
Yes, Hope literally comes to give him hope. Oh gosh. And the act has to conclude on an incredibly cheesy scene of Josh associating snow with God and faith. And this is called the signs, so Josh does get a sign that, I don't know. It snows. That's how the scene ends, with snow, and it's supposed to be magical, but it's not.
Yeah, there's little connection aside from a scene, I suppose, a small scene where his grandpa tells him that it's the snow. That's how I know that God is real. Aside from that there has no other connection.
If you want to see a much more powerful scene that has to do with the elements and God, then go and watch V for Vendetta after Natalie Portman is, not trying to give anything away here, but after she's done being tortured, she talks about rain and God, and then she stands outside and says God is in the rain. Now, God is not in the rain, okay? That's like monism, that's not true. Nevertheless, It's a much more powerful scene and more connective.
A much better movie, too, by the way.
Much better movie. Oh, gosh. Also, whenever there is kind of like rain or snow and we are trying to connect it with God, kind of reminds me also in Blade Runner 2049, where he's standing out in the rain with his hologram girlfriend. Mm-hmm. Much better scene. And they didn't even talk in that scene pretty much.
Oh, yeah. There's so much more emotion brought forth in just one scene in Blade Runner than his entire movie.
I know. Oh dear. Anyways, moving on to Act 3, May the Answers. We skip ahead quite a bit. Okay, so, gosh, I really want to understand this. Josh believes Brickman wasn't acting crazy by taking the Pope hostage. He was telling Josh something about his mission. Which is what? Which is what?
No idea. I don't even remember that part, to be honest with you. I thought I wrote it down in my notes. Oh, no, okay. He stole a picture of the Pope. That's right. He stole a picture of the Pope. I remember now.
So he just decided to get out of his chair during somebody's oral report, take a picture of the Pope, which apparently is naughty. He runs outside, climbs on the jungle gym, and he holds it up like, look at the Pope, look, hold it up. And I'm just so frustrated because now I'm like intrigued. I'm like, okay, you're starting the third act with something really weird. Yeah. Where's the payoff? Where is this? You can't just cut off an arc. But they do. He does.
This is also, Sister Sophia does absolutely nothing aside from tell the other kids, hey, go get another sister to go get Brickman off the jungle gym. This scene makes absolutely no sense. And if you cut it out, it would not change anything at all. Aside from at the very end, Sister Sophia apparently wrote a book about the kid in the jungle gym.
Yeah.
Can't forget that.
That utterly pointless monologue that wraps everything up in such a way that nobody cares. And
yeah.
Anyways, I did realize I have seen Brickman before in something else. He's played by Michael Schulman, who played in 3 years earlier. He played the character Artie in the TV series Party of Five. He was Claudia's boyfriend. So if anybody is a Party of Five fan like me, then you will realize Brickman is played by Michael Schulman. That's probably 0.002% of everybody out there making this connection that I just made. So there's a little bit of trivia just in case.
Yes, because we need a bit more than just ranting here.
Yeah, I'm trying to give you a bit more insight, a bit more depth into the deep connections of this movie. More than Shyamalan is doing anyway. But, so, okay, where are we at now? Gosh.
Oh yeah, next is Freddy. He does leave after this.
Yeah, I was so lost. So, at first they just show his back. So I thought it was Brickman. And I thought, okay, we're continuing.
So did I.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that you would logically assume that it is Brickman because of the scene before it. A great example as to how scenes just don't add up in this movie.
Right. A equals D in this
Yes.
movie.
I mean, logically, it makes sense.
Right. Logically, you would just jump to ahead. Okay. So what you're telling me is that Freddy I thought he was getting expelled, but his parents are saying that they can't pay for it. Mm-hmm. To me, this is once again Shyamalan trying to just crib off of himself from the previous movie, where the bully is expelled and they both come to a mutual respect of each other. And I just saw so many elements, like connective elements from this movie and last movie, that it felt more like almost a bit of a copy in those ways, although they're very different. And I don't know why we even care about Freddy getting expelled.
I don't either. This scene comes out of nowhere with no context and no background knowledge as to Freddy actually being somebody about Freddy possibly being a kid who has to leave the school. There's nothing here that brings this scene into fruition in an organic way in any way. There is a connection that you can make with this previous movie where he does this somewhat of the similar thing with the bully, but that's a completely different movie. It is not Praying with Anger. This one is not Praying with Anger. So yeah, this scene comes out of nowhere, only serves to teach some kind of lesson, I guess, of be nice to everybody aside from how they treat you, maybe? It makes no sense as to why it's here, and it makes no sense as to the whole grand scheme of the movie here.
Also, rarely are there any consequences to these kids' actions. Yeah. They're very ornery and some would say naughty with what they do. And we get this here with, what's his name? Dave. Dave wants to cheat because he can't focus, okay? But they're on a secret mission. It's kind of funny, but it's really pointless to the plot. And they don't get caught, which bothers me that everything just comes across so easy in 5th grade. And if anybody has lived through 5th grade, it's not easy.
Yeah.
So if you want to see a movie about 8th grade, Alan and I saw, and shows you that it's not easy, then go see that.
I would highly recommend it. I like it a lot. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There is no consequences in this movie, like hardly at all. Mm-hmm. This kind of reminds me of a more recent movie called Wonder, and it's more about a kid who has more of a abnormally looking face, and he gets made fun of for it. But this kid, the main character, he kind of gets away with a lot of things, and that's also the same thing here, where there's really no consequences to what happens, whatever the kid does. This is the kind of the whole state of the whole movie, though, here is it's not just our main character, it's also his friend and a couple other characters like Brickman. We don't ever see really anything come of the bad things that they do here. They just seem like they just happen to move the plot along and then drop it completely. And there's nothing done about it after the scene ends. They even, at one point, they even say, at the very end of the school year, I guess is the head principal of the school, I don't really know her name, but she comes on and says, if you were the one who stole the mop bucket and did the thing with that other thing, please come forward. And they're talking about the escape plan that Josh and Dave made up. And she says, the janitor would really appreciate it. And that's the only amount of consequence that we get here.
Yep, that he would appreciate it, and he's the one sliding around on the bucket also. Yeah, and it's kind of hard to say it's even a consequence because nothing, once again, it's just play for laughs. Nothing comes of it. Yeah, it's definitely a very easy movie in regards to that, which if there would have been more conflict with those situations, and even it's so frustrating because they don't give us any definitive answers as to why Brickman acts the way he does, and he never gets in trouble. That's why I thought, he was going to be expelled and we were going to get some deeper context to the situation, but instead they just go with Freddy, and Josh shows that he's the bigger man and shakes his hand. And there's an awful close-up shot of their hands shaking for like ever. Yeah. It's that cliche misunderstood bully trope, but it plays really hardly there's no reason for it to be here. Of course, the movie is coming to a close, so they're going to have to wrap it up soon as to proving God exists. I can't imagine this movie ending on this nihilistic note. Yeah, not this Nietzsche. Movie. I doubt that would happen. I couldn't imagine it. Yeah. So in order for us to get Josh believing, we have to give Dave epileptic seizures and call it a miracle that Josh found him. More like a coincidence, a script coincidence, if you ask me. Yeah. Can you spell contrived? I mean... Oof. It's like written all over the scene. I'm pretty sure it's hard to miss. And they're going to, of course, say, oh no, we set it up. Remember, we said Dave couldn't focus on his test. Things were blurry. You didn't believe him, did you? Well, now you should, because he's a sad, epileptic character. Mm-hmm. This should have been more pronounced throughout the rest of the movie if we were going to go down this route. Right. I will say this, that it does have more setup than the Freddy situation, because they do say that Dave just randomly does miss school. They don't give any reason for it until now. It's one of those things where they don't bring it up until way too late, or don't
have hardly any lead-in. This has more lead-in than most things in this movie, but that does not give it a pass, because it does still come out of absolutely nowhere. Because Josh decides one day that he needs to go visit Dave for one reason or another, and just happens to come across him.
Right. Well, once again, this was also a cliche of the time, I feel, especially of young dramas, where the friend is missing from school due to some sad reason. The kid's either getting abused and they don't want to come to school so they don't see their black eye. I guess my mind is going to Kindergarten Cop right now. But also, there are other movies. I've just seen this done before where my friend has been missing and I don't know why. And then you realize there's a darker side to life, that it's not all roses and that some kids have it tough. That's completely fine to put that in movies. I'm just saying I've seen this before, and it's also overly melodramatic when we come to this scene where it's incredibly ominous. Honestly, I'm thinking Dave has been super depressed maybe, and he tries to kill himself. And just the way they portray it with the music and this ominous tone of Dave, nobody's home. And I didn't know what was going on anyway. And then Josh runs out screaming in slow motion. Maybe they're trying to show it from a child's perspective how overly dramatic it would be, and it would be scary, but to me it doesn't work. Yeah,
M. Night Shyamalan hasn't learned how to be effective in creating, I guess, an emotion for this kind of a scene. Yeah, it comes out of nowhere. It has no lead into it, and the only purpose it serves is much later on. It's the thing that causes Josh to go back and start searching again. Aside from that, it doesn't really do much. But once again, it does. I suppose it does have a bit more lead in than most anything else in this movie with Dave missing school a lot. But that does not excuse it from being a very, very contrived scene.
And making another connection is when we get this flashback to when Josh falls down, he learns to pick himself up and runs to his grandpa. Better done in Batman Begins with Bruce Wayne and his dad. Why do we fall, Bruce? To learn to pick ourselves up. We didn't get any resonance here, and it's really ruined by the music. They thought the music would really add that oomph to it, and I know some movies can do that well. This one can't.
Yeah, the music here is incredibly 90s for the time.
Right, and once again, we're trying to draw back to Bible and God and biblical parallels. I couldn't help but think of the verse, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race. Josh literally finishes the race. I have kept the faith. It couldn't have been more obvious.
Yeah. Subtlety is not this movie's strong point. At all.
Okay, Alan, I gotta know your thoughts on on Josh's just Oscar-winning speech here at the end, his wide awake speech.
Yes. The only thing I have done in my notes, let me see if I can find it. Here it is. The only thing I have really down for this scene is, he's going off script. Because at one point he's reading it and just puts his paper down and just starts just talking. I'm wide awake now. I was asleep before, but now I woke up.
Ooh.
I mean, I guess the movie has been leading up to this point of just sheer cheesiness. But that does not excuse it from being bad.
Right. They're trying to continue off of the Paul motif. He ran the race, he kept the faith, and Paul said, when I was a child, I acted like a child. Now that I'm a man, I've put away childish things. And his mom says in the beginning, time to wake up. You're almost a man. My mom and dad never told me in 5th grade I was almost a man.
Yeah.
I mean, how old are you? 10 years old?
Yeah, that's about right. 9 or 10, yeah.
So I think probably Josh he's a decent child actor, Joseph Cross, but his facial expressions really bother me throughout this movie because he's always concerned, he's always troubled about something. His brow furrows. This whole scene is so Oscar baity that it's not even funny, and it's so annoying. I know, the sheer oh gosh, just the sheer literalness. That's not a word. Gosh,
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean.
Unsubtleness.
Yeah, the lack of subtlety. It struck me as like I couldn't even believe it. So at first I rejected. At first I rejected it. I'm like, no, this is not what they're saying. This is not it. And then I just couldn't believe that's the title of the movie. I had forgot about the title of the movie. Come to find out, he means it in, like, I'm wide awake, like I understand more about the world now. But gosh, the fact that they had to tie it into, on the first day of school, his dad has to brush his teeth because he's asleep while doing it, which is completely unbelievable. And then on the last day of school, he's Mr. Sharp-dressed man in the bathroom, wide awake. Awful. Just way to ruin the movie there at the end.
To me, this was no surprise. Because when this scene came up, I was just like, this fits with everything else we've been building up to this point, which isn't much, but it is there. It was no surprise to me that this ended the way that it did. But it makes it even worse and arguably even funnier when they start like wrapping up the story and showing the janitor and how he's looking for the kid who was the one who stole the mop pail, or how the PE teacher kicked one of the sisters with a soccer ball, and they're hoping for a good return from her and a healthy stay at the hospital. They're just wrapping up things that had no build up at all before them until now. In fact, I would even argue we get more of these characters now than we did when they were actually in their scenes. It just comes out of nowhere, and it just like, now let's wrap everything up. It's meant to be really funny, but it has no purpose here. It's just there for, I guess, to just be funny, but even then it's not that funny at all, really.
Also, this film has cornered itself into being purely monologue driven in order to explain character arcs and scenes. So there's other movies and TV shows that have done this better. This more so would have worked better in a TV show where we would have had time to develop these different characters. Otherwise, these characters mean nothing to us. Never even seen them before. So why do I care?
This is very much a TV movie quality kind of film. I would even say that it's a 45-minute short film stretched out to be an hour-and-a-half feature-length movie.
Mm-hmm. And I did also see this very much as, we need more Rosie O'Donnell. Also, we need to pad the runtime. Let's give her a very filler monologue. Also, we've only been with this kid for 3 months of the school year, and honestly, not even that. So, I don't know. This was just completely pointless. The two other examples that I can give you that do this better are, in my opinion, the end of Napoleon Dynamite. It wraps up the character arcs in a satisfactory way, and it doesn't need any monologue. It's all done through just music and editing. And then also in the very end of Freaks and Geeks, which is a phenomenal TV show, much better than this, about coming of age and being in junior high school and high school. That wraps up in a satisfactory way as well. We don't need Rosie O'Donnell to narrate to us.
Yeah. Once again, this is kind of a surprise. Everything else building up to this point in the movie is all kind of been leading up to this. So it's no surprise, but it's still no excuse.
Honestly, I'll even say that the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movie does a better job of providing character arcs and a look at middle school and how that all ends in the perspective of that. So I'd rather be watching that than this.
I mean, that is saying quite a bit, though, but at the same time, this is Wide Awake we're talking about. This is pre-Sixth Sense M. Night Shyamalan.
And I am just shocked, listeners. In a year's time, apparently, M. Night Shyamalan is going to have an epiphany. He's going to figure out how to make a 6-time Oscar-nominated film. I'm sure he's been working on the script longer than this, but these came out within a year of each other.
That's right. Well, at least in terms of theatrical release, because we mentioned earlier that this was finished in 95, but didn't get released until 98. But you're right. Within a year, something happened within a year.
Something happened. He figured it out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, we've got to talk about this final scene here that I just flipped out. I put in my notes, if you tell me this little boy, this new kid is an angel, I'm going to flip.
And he is. He is an angel. Can't you tell? The one scene that he actually did something in? And I wonder how much of this movie is missing. And just left on the editing room floor, because I feel like we're missing a ton, but at the same time, I also think that we're not, because we're missing scenes where he tried being a Muslim, and then he also fasted for Thanksgiving. That was in the scene between Sister Sophia and our main character, Josh. But there's also this scene. Things just kind of come and go as they please almost. And I feel like we're just missing big chunks of this movie that explain a lot of things and maybe would help the pacing a little bit better. And maybe we're not. We have no way of knowing that, but that's just the way it feels. It feels like we're missing huge scenes that are kind of important here that just, for whatever reason, didn't make it into the final cut. And this is one of those where this kid is also an angel that did absolutely nothing aside from that one time when he told him, don't go out that door. It's an emergency exit. It'll sound the alarm.
And this almost isn't even a movie because we don't have organic plotting sequences and character arcs and developments. Because like we said, the family is fairly pivotal. They're fairly important. At least they're showcased well in the first act, and then they're just gone after that. And I liked the scene where he's talking about going to Rome and he printed up a sheet from the computer for them. I thought that was a pretty decent scene around the dinner table. But then it would have been great to have that around Thanksgiving. But this movie, just because of how much monologuing we have, it just doesn't even feel like a movie.
Yeah, it's that once again even makes you wonder if the monologuing was done after the fact. Maybe. Once again have no way of knowing that. It feels more like a Blade Runner U.S. theatrical release than it does anything else, where they did something after the fact to make it easier on the audience, I suppose. I don't know. This movie is so incredibly shallow that there's really not much you can get out of it aside from, I guess, how not to make a movie, maybe? I don't know. It's something that is, to me, it's just, it almost feels like a waste of time because of how much that could be there, but totally is not there.
Did you clock watch at all?
I think I did towards the later half a little bit. I guess I was just more having a little bit of fun by seeing what scenes, having a bet with myself, will this next scene not connect to the scene previous?
Yeah, Alan's better about not clock watching than me. If I really am frustrated and don't like it, I will just clock watch constantly. I will turn on the timer clock on the screen. I will count it down. Oh.
See, I've learned that if I do that, the movie is longer for me.
Yeah.
So I try to do it too much.
That's true. That's definitely true. Well, I guess we can say this is M. Night Shyamalan's first twist. He is known for putting twists in the end of his movies. This is a twist, you could say, with the boy actually being his guardian angel. And once again, everything is super shallow. It's all based upon happiness. And so the grandpa was able to send an angel to make sure his grandson was happy and had faith. And honestly, we don't even get that. We don't even get any proofs. The boy is like, I just believe in two things. Not all angels have wings. And sixth grade's got to be a lot easier than this. Wink, wink.
I'd be hard pressed to even call it a twist. I don't think it's much of that at all, because at least with his later movies, there's a good reason for the twist to be there, and it does play a part in the movie. Now, whether or not they do a good job at doing that is up for debate when we get to those points. But it feels like this is just something. Now, I will give you this. It does kind of start the twist thing that M. Night Shyamalan is just known for having ever since The Sixth Sense and really on there. This may be kind of like a precursor to all of that. But it'd be hard for me to call it a twist because it doesn't have any input in the story, whether or not this was in there or it had been taken out completely. It doesn't really do too much to change the story completely, aside from, I guess, prove that God is real, maybe, but it doesn't exactly say that outright, which I would assume that this movie, being that how it has been the last hour and 20 minutes, it might do something like that, but it doesn't. Yeah,
it's not a good twist at all. But I guess as far as M. Night Shyamalan goes, we can say that he, I guess, subverted our expectations and pulled the rug out from under us on the end. Haha, he got us. Anyways,
Yeah.
as
Oh man, didn't see it coming at all, but from a mile away.
anyways, I was going to mention, I did forget to mention that Alan brought up Blade Runner, but yes, rarely do movies that are monologued throughout the entire movie, rarely do they work as satisfying narratives, because it's a lot of you're supposed to show, not tell in a movie, but with this, it's telling and not showing. They're telling us how we're supposed to feel. They're telling us what exactly is going on. And
Right.
that Blade Runner theatrical cut, I don't recommend you watch it. Watch the final cut. It's awful with its monologue.
Yeah.
Also, my girlfriend and I recently were watching Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. Are you familiar with such a
yeah.
movie?
It's been a while since I've seen that.
Yeah, we were watching it because we were trying to realize what DreamWorks animated films we hadn't seen. She hadn't seen this one. And I thought it was Chad Michael Murray monologuing that whole movie. No, come to find out it's Matt Damon.
Really? Interesting.
It's not good. I remember that movie being so much better when I was a kid. It's not good. It's bad. So monologues don't work. So narrators, film creators, let this be a lesson to you. Don't monologue your movie. It shows that you don't know how to create genuine emotions within characters. You have to have them just explain it to us.
I would say that there is a good way of doing it. Most films just don't do it very well. Maybe a film like Fight Club does have some monologues in it, but at the same time, that's also playing really well into the story and isn't something that's used to be a cheesy tactic. But more often than not, when you have a narration, it's there to help, at least its goal is to provide context, but it also doesn't do a very good job at showing. It just tells, and most of the time. There are good ways of doing it, but most of the time, like you were just saying, it's not very well implemented at all.
Alan, what is your rating and recommendation for Wide Awake?
Not good. It's not this is a very poor movie, than what I was expecting it was going to be. Cause I had a little bit of hope from the last one that he would have learned a few things and would have had a more competent movie. And in some ways it is better than the previous movie, but in a lot of ways it's so random. And has a really hard. Feels like it was edited by somebody who has ADHD, and it didn't get past to the final edit and the director before it moved on and was given to the theaters. Because, like I mentioned so many times, there are scenes here that just don't connect with the one that came before it. There are plot threads here that don't connect to anything. And then there are random scenes that just straight up don't belong at all. And then there are scenes that are completely missing from this movie that feel like they should be in there. It's not really well acted. They put the sister of Sophia's, actor on all the posters because they know that would bring her in some money, bring in the movie some money, but she does very little for the movie. And in reality, this, like I said, this movie is is shallower than the question that it asks, which it doesn't even try to answer hardly at all. And when it does, it's very unsatisfying. That's kind of the word I can probably put to say this, the word that best explains this movie is just straight up unsatisfying. So no, I'm not going to recommend this one. And I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10. Not recommend from me. Very poor movie from M. Night Shyamalan. Luckily, he does get much better from here on out.
So of this and Praying Anger, just rank these two? This first.
Oh, that's so hard because they both have good and bad things that make them almost even for me. I guess I'll put Praying for Anger higher because I feel like I can actually watch the movie again. This one, I don't want to watch again.
M. Night Shyamalan's second writing and directorial outing, but first mass theatrical creation, is a jumbled bag of cheesiness and poor theology. What started strong as an interesting premise of a young boy who lost his grandfather, who he was very close with, quickly shatters into a hodgepodge of a wannabe, heartwarming, lighthearted family film wrapped in a deeper theological subtext of faith and the meanderings of a fifth grader. I found Act 1 to be funny, well edited, and intriguing. Alas, towards the end of Act 1, the film completely loses focus. Character development is halted, emotionality is forced, the quest for God is cheapened through glossed over moments of existentialism, and certain story points such as the boy and his crush Hope are wrapped up out of left field. I'm severely disappointed in this film. It's an utter waste of time. Skip this Shyamalan nightmare. 4 stars out of 10 with a strong not recommend.
Part of me was wondering if it was going to be like an Angels in the Outfield kind of movie.
Oh, yeah.
And then when we got into the football, it was just like, maybe we are going to spend time with football. And then they totally drop everything. And they don't ever go anything past that scene. And then the teacher, or Sister Sophia being all like, trying to teach a lesson by using football terms. No, it has nothing to do. It is nothing like Angels in the Outfield, as far as I remember. It's been a while since I've seen that movie too, so
it did
I really
have
don't care.
Right. It did have potential to be a sports movie connected with angels and God and have been funny, but this movie isn't sure whether it wants to be funny, serious, both. So I will say it did have potential in the beginning, and if they could have kept up what they started in the beginning, I think, and just gone deeper with it, then I would have enjoyed it. Because like I said, I enjoyed the first act, but then this movie wasn't sure whether it wanted to be one of those fun family 90s movies like Dennis the Menace, which I do enjoy for what it is. But then it also tries to be, what did I say? Ordinary people or something just really heavy, dealing with death and stuff. It just, Shyamalan, so confused. But I am excited to review The Sixth Sense. But listeners, you will have to wait a few weeks.
Yes, just a little bit, because we have 2 Mad Max movies to get through and Pet Sematary after those 2.
That's right, listeners. We will be coming back to you next week with the first installment in our Mad Max retrospective series. And after that, we will be coming back to you with the Road Warrior and then Pet Sematary, the original 80s version. I think that's when it came out. So at the time of this recording, I will be done. No, at the time of this recording, I'm almost done. But by the time you're listening to this, I will be done with reading the book. And I gotta say, I love the book. So I highly recommend you going and checking out the book. It might be kind of hard to get your hands on as the theatrical movie approaches. More people will be wanting to read it. So we will be doing those 3 reviews, taking a bit of a Shyamalan break, which I think we need after these 2 because these 2 were bad. And
yes, we do need a break. Thank you.
I will agree with Alan that Praying with Anger, I gave it a 5. I gave it a 5 out of 10. This is a 4 out of 10. So Praying with Anger is just a teensy bit higher. But honestly, I'll never rewatch these movies if I don't have to.
Yeah, I will only go back to Praying with Anger just for the fun of it. Just to see, it's kind of like the same thing with Guy and Madeline on a park bench. I don't think either of them are really all that great, but for me, I could just tell that there is some great passion put into them, so I could return to for that.
Sure.
But aside from everything else, they're not great.
Well, listeners, you don't want to miss out on our Mad Max review series coming up very soon, and then you don't want to miss out when we do come back to review The Sixth Sense. So go ahead and click subscribe right now. Go ahead and share this with your friends and family. We love talking about movies, and we love talking about them with you. So we do want to hear your thoughts. Did you see Wide Awake? What did you think of it? Is this one you feel like you must see to complete your Shyamalan watching? Or are you just going to skip it and you think The Sixth Sense is really his more so definitive first movie? Also, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. We would really appreciate that. That helps us in the rankings get noticed by other people who are looking to have fun, just relaxing with a movie review podcast, and that they can engage with as well. We do recommend following us on social media so you do not miss out. That's a great way to not miss out. So those links are in the description below. If you're old school and you like email like me, go ahead and go to our website and you'll get a pop-up. And if for some reason you don't get a pop-up, just look at the top of the screen and there'll be a subscribe button. Click on that and you'll get your email inputted. So every week you will get everything that we've put out, so you'll never miss a beat. So make sure to go and subscribe through those as well. We appreciate you guys listening and sticking with us with this Wide Awake review. I am curious to see what you think, listeners. So go ahead and watch the movie and give us your thoughts as well. Thanks for joining me, Alan.
Not a problem. I'm excited for next week.
I'm excited
Mad
for next
Max.
week too. Alan has seen Mad Max. I saw the first 15 minutes before church one day. Who knows what I was doing? I don't know, but clearly I didn't get to finish it. So I'm intrigued to come back and revisit it and to see. I'm going to hold my thoughts. I have seen only one of them. I've seen Mad Max Fury Road, But I'm going to hold my thoughts on that one, whether I like it or not, until we get to it. Yes, and
this would be, I've seen the first one, this one we're going to watch, and the latest one, Fury Road. So I haven't seen Road Warrior or whatever the third one's called, Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah, Beyond Thunderdome.
Haven't seen those two yet. Yeah, so I've only seen the first and the last, at least at the time of this recording. So I'm curious to see what happens. It's been a while since I've seen Mad Max, the original.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I'm ready to go.
To it. Well, listeners, we will see you next week with Mad Max. Quickly shatters into a hodgepodge of a wannabe, heartwarming... Hold on. The computer always wants to restart when I'm in the middle of this.
Yeah.
Darn it, come on. Okay, we need to wait a minute for it to think.
Gotta love Windows updates.
Classic. Always during a podcast, listeners.
Every time. They always come up at the worst time possible.
Yes.
Every time.
Worst time. And now it's just not... Now it's stuck.
Great.
Oh, wait. No, it's thinking. It's working. Maybe. I don't know. I want it off the screen before I start talking. I need to make sure the recording is still working and whatnot.
That would be good.
Yeah. Okay, Alan, you could take like a bathroom break real quick if you want or something.
Well, I would, but I don't gotta go to the bathroom, so.
Great.
So we went and saw How to Train Your Dragon 3 last night.
Oh yeah, was it any good?
It was pretty good.
Best movie ever?
No, not really.
Well, I like it if I don't care for the first two. Oh wait,
maybe.
Okay. Is his voice more like palatable? Because I couldn't stand his voice in the first two movies.
A little bit.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've seen those two, so it's kind of hard for me to tell. A little bit.
I think that was like my biggest hindrance from enjoying those movies was his voice was so nasally and whiny. I just was... Yeah. Gosh, it was awful. His voice was awful.
I can't tell you if it's better or worse, because I can't remember those first two movies and how they were with his voice.
Alright, I'll have to give him a shot again, because I just remember not caring for those movies, but maybe they're good. I don't know. I know people love them, so...
I like them, but it has been a while since I've seen them, so I consider my opinions on them outdated.
Okay. I don't remember. I remember not liking the first Hotel Transylvania. I couldn't finish it, even though
I heard really good things about that. I remember watching the second one, or at least parts of it.
I didn't like it. I didn't like the first one. That's just
I remember liking. I thought the second one was okay at best.
Yeah, first one's not any good. Anyways, okay, I can go now.
All right, go for it.
I'm just gonna start from the beginning.